Well, hello, Julie. Welcome to Rendering Unconscious. Thank you so much for being here to talk about your new book, Negative Psychoanalysis for the Living Dead.
Thank you, Vanessa.
I love what you did just to start for your patrons, like starting this Patreon and then making a study group where people could meet with you weekly and discuss the chapters. It was such a great idea, and I hope that it was really successful for you. And yeah, I love also that you put the videos up on YouTube so that people can follow along there as well with the book.
Thanks, Vanessa. And it's still functioning. They can still join if they want for some reason.
Maybe for the next book.
No,
I don't want to
well,
write any more books either, so.
you can notice like betrayal of this book if you write another book because it's like it's not supposed to be written. Even this one cannot just proceed writing another book, at least not in this kind of form. Because if you actually disillusioned in academia and in this kind of writing and being smart, uh, you cannot probably proceed just writing one more. Like I won't be able to find excuse for another one.
I understand that. I am also disillusioned with academia and writing books. So now that's why all I do now is like make art because I'm like, what's the fucking point? I'll just do whatever I want to do in the moment and it doesn't need to add up to anything because it doesn't matter anyway.
I plan it for the future. Right now, I'm still functioning with the discipline that I need to, exist in the world somehow. But it's like it is suicidal. So the art, disappearing from the world of playing, being smart in academia, and just doing things outside of it. So I'm planning suicidal thinking postponed to the future, form of disappearing.
It makes sense. I found the book refreshing. I know in the beginning of your talks you said you apologize for writing this book and you don't recommend that anybody reads it. But I found it refreshing because I also find that the like, especially like the pop psychology world of like, promising, you'll be better and happier if you just do these steps and everything is so banal and yeah, it's kind of insulting to human integrity.
It is insulting, but maybe. But I came to see it as I used to be against it, trying to improve world. You need to recognize we should stop stigmatizing depression. And then I thought it actually might be also trauma response. These people are so. It is irritating trauma response and maybe humiliating to people, but it's also trauma response. You can sense suffering in there. It's an attempt to escape it, and that's how I'm tolerating it right now. So I wouldn't see my book as profoundly different from the it might look like, and it even in the description of it, I would write that it's opposite to positive psychology culture, but profoundly it's also dealing both of those cultures, the negative culture and the positive culture with the trauma. I also came to see human being as suffering as such. Maybe that's my way of existing in the world. That's how I still can tolerate people, seeing them all as suffering, and trying to find escape from it, but failing in different ways, like through positive psychology, through the culture of psychology. But even if they're super happy, I'm tolerating them, knowing that they're suffering inside and that suffering is mostly what they are. And surprisingly, it finds response in people. People can resonate with it. So it's not the, it is position of outsider, but at the same time, like inclusion to into something.
I think that makes sense. And that's a very empathic response to just understand that people are having their different trauma responses and yeah, not trying not to judge them. Just, people are making their way, however that is.
And each of them is ridiculous in their own way. So the difference of this book, the most profound one, is probably that I'm writing from a position of depression, not trying like giving up on. I never was actually trying to escape it that much because I have troubles as a philosopher relating to psychology culture, the positive culture, but like questioning it. But at the same time, uh, different from writing from a position of depression, like giving voice to depression is different from other attitudes to depression and to melancholia, because whoever deals with it tries to it stigmatizes it automatically. Even the word depression means it's something you need to get rid of. And I was trying to um, give voice maybe to hopelessness, to actually being in a position of depression, because even it is understandable that within the psychotherapy culture, this is what would be normally done when one deals with depression, it would be to get rid of depression. But even in psychoanalysis that try to reformulate, contemporary psychoanalysis tries to reformulate a discourse about depression and melancholia, it would be still from a position of uh, normality. Like whoever speaks about it doesn't have depression, and at the same time like rejecting it, or condemnation of depression, rejection and stigmatization. It shouldn't be like that. And I'm wondering, I don't believe in this space outside of it. Like there is no where are they speaking from? Like they don't have it. Even Kristeva in her amazing book otherwise, The Black Sun, she's writing about her own experience of depression, which is the most beautiful part of it, like what she feels in her body when she's her suffering. But still she's like self-stigmatizing, trying to um, get rid of it, trying to look for way out. Like this is not normal, even if she's the one representing it and she's talking about it from her depression, but also patient. And what I was trying to do was actually talking about it, not from the position of trying to escape from depression or all of the internal suffering, wherever we call it. Depression is just normal world today that you'd use, and people will understand more or less what you're talking about. But actually being with it, and maybe connecting to others through it from this space, from not giving guidance or hope how to escape, because it's the only way we normally deal with it, but like assuming that it's something that we all share. That's the basic domain. It's not that something went wrong the way we hope in today. I'm depressed, I'm suffering, I don't want to live anymore, life is meaningless, something like that. And it means that this is deviation, is not is how it's supposed to be, and each of us going through it and thinking there's something wrong with me, and it's not supposed to be like it because before maybe it wasn't. Or I know people who look happy and there's something wrong with me, but what if it's not something wrong? What if it's all there is? And for me, like there's nothing left, to be honest. That's who I am. It's nothing less substantial, because everything else seems not genuine something. And I'm not able to function in any other. I know I look happy, cheerful, but at the same time, the profound truth is that this is the dimension I'm functioning in, and I don't think that it's secondary, that this is deviation. Or at least I have to think, because there is nothing else left. I have to think that this is the most profound, basic dimension, and I'm functioning in it more or less, and I'm trying to see connection with people through it, not guiding them out and not guiding myself out of it. And it's surprisingly that people are resonating with it. Like if I talk about this dimension as basic and something that we share, people would come and say that they can also feel it. Of course, I'm projecting myself and I'm imposing my way of thinking, but Freud did it too. So, like, um, so maybe I can do it at least as a way of experimenting, of understanding human being and the world.
Yeah, and the people are resonating with it, as a way of being in the world rather than something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, rather than it needs to be fixed, because normally psychoanalysis, even though it suggests alternative understanding of depression, of internal suffering, but it would be still guidance. Like psychoanalytic sessions would be still guiding. Like psychoanalyst would be someone talking from a position where there is no depression. And I don't believe in this position. Even if they have it inside of them, they have to keep it as a secret, because they need to be normal and healthy, and because they need to provide guidance. Or at least if you have experience of depression, you need to be the one either who get rid of it in a form, or knows how to deal with it, like what to make out of it, some kind of professional in getting rid of depression or dealing with depression. And even if you so automatically, if you admit that you are depressed, you are, even if you're analyst, you occupy the position of analyst and the way people would treat you. Even if you wrote the book, academic book that is published, like you are in a position in relation to you, other people would play the role of analysis. You're not able to actually talk about it and to be heard, to be perceived not as someone that needs to guidance and to be fixed and help from others. I'm wondering if there is any other, if analyst, if people can connect in analysis or whatever it's called, some kind of practice, not occupying this position of fixing other people, or a position of an analyst as someone who is supposed to fix or guide or improve anything, but in other kind of relationship, because this guidance, this automatic reaction to me is form of escaping, like not actually seeing others. And it's easy to understand why we occupy this position, because it's extremely hard to admit, like it's falling into nothingness with no words. And Lacanian psychoanalysis would emphasize the need, when depression is mentioned, they would emphasize the need to speak well, to put it into words, or some kind of proper words, or some kind of proper language that would imply you escaping through the language, through the symbolic, from a proper way of structuring symbolic from depression. It's still guidance, it's still what to do. And even Kristeva, she would talk about linguistic retardation, it's her term, like depressive retardation. And so this guidance through symbolic somewhere, and I'm wondering whether we can maybe do something else, not escaping, admitting it, and not escaping. It might be that we won't be able to talk, because this retardation, linguistic retardation, not disability to talk, or to talk well. It's probably true, but maybe it's also something very important that you cannot talk about, you cannot put into words. And precisely because of this, it's very important. So this retardation, and retardation is, I know it's not politically correct term, my daughter told me never to use it, but this retardation is like getting slower, and I am retardation, I'm not, that's what I represent, the inability to talk, when words are failing, when I'm not able to communicate something well. It might be disorder, but it's also maybe it's, and the absence of not being clever, not being even wise, but something like this, when you're not, you're failing to conceptualize, or you're failing to say, or you don't find, failing to find a meaning. These failures may be something that is important, and they can also connect people, and it's also a form of existence through death. So instead of trying to improve everyone, get rid of depression, speak well, and connect through this, like be all healed and happy ever after together. Maybe there's, but first of all, it's impossible. But second thing is, maybe it's possible to exist on this level and to connect with others on this level. Maybe actual connection is this, not superficial one, but actual one is happening in there. And I see it as for some reason, as a feminine dimension, which is not traditional association, because feminine dimension would be normally associated with absence of suffering, like healing, life. But for me, and this dimension of maternal and infant in psychoanalysis is traditionally dimension of generation of enjoyment. But for me, this the most profound layer of existence, the primitive one. For me, it would be rather associating feminine, maternal with destruction and suffering and death, like seeing it as the space, the most profound space where we are falling into the basic one. So it's completely probably different comprehension of a human being from Freudian standard psychoanalytic to this one, comprehension of the world as not profoundly, but still different. And here I'm close to Sabina Spielrein, who I think was talking about something similar, with associating maternal and death and destructive. This sea, the mother sea, the primordial dimension. It's all about destruction and dissolution and death. It might result in life, children, and all of those, but it's still through destruction of maternal body, and it's maternal that is going on through dissolution and it's suffering. And for me, it's the profound layer of existence where we still connected profoundly, and there is no way of escaping through anything like symbolic or well, any form of escape would be rather illusionary in relation to it.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about Spielrein and the death drive, and then also Catherine Marabu's kind of expansion of it?
So Sabina Spielrein, I regret not writing enough about her in the book, but I'm going to publish hopefully a chapter about her in upcoming volume on love and death, rather death and love. So Sabina Spielrein was the one who introduced the concept of death instinct, and Freud, one can say, stole it from her. Well, he gave her credit, but not enough for us to remember that the concept initially belonged to her. And in her formulation, it was different. Like there's different comprehension of what is death drive, unlike what Freud transformed it into. And her is more, we could say, feminine understanding, linking it to, because she's a woman, maybe, linking it to the maternal, and not, at least not her initial point of consideration. It's not Freudian point of consideration. It's thinking through her experience of being in love and her patient women and their feeling of being in love, and linking it to the, not the sexuality and enjoyment and all of that to some extent, but it was link of death, destruction, love, maternal, so completely different shades that Freud would later give the concept of the death drive. And so I really like Sabina Spielrein work, but rather as a mood of her creation. And I think one should deal with her works, and I'm trying to do it, not through analytic comprehension, if you know, the way we normally deal with philosophical works or with psychoanalytic works, trying to work on the level of concepts or theories, or not through yourself. It's like you have to stay neutral, this scientific kind of approach, which is less in psychoanalysis because it's more, there is more space for some kind of creativity and your own readings, but it still works with concepts, with, trying to meticulously to see what was told and what Freud said, what is correct, what is this, there's interesting thing that Freud discovered or Lacan discovered or Spielrein discovered. And I would try to safeguard especially Spielrein from this comprehension, because there is other way of thinking, and maybe not necessarily thinking, it's rather failure of thinking when you, through your own experience, through your own existence or non-existence, you actually human being that goes through experiences of death and dying and suffering and being in love. And even if you work in the conceptual level with those concepts, trying to analyze and reference someone's ideas and combine them together, it's still what we're hiding, I think. It's still our own experience and talking about ourselves, even, or our absent selves, or universal maybe experience of love or dying that we are that is familiar to us, in which we are disappearing. So I'm trying to work with Spielrein, like with the spirit of Spielrein, being her, because to some extent I am. I mean, I'm getting where she's coming from. You just don't need to read her that much. You have to, but it's rather what is there inside of you that is resonating. And of course, it's totally unprofessional and weird, but
I
it might
prefer
be.
that mode, so
Yeah.
I'm with you.
It's just
To me,
hard
it's
to
more
put.
psychoanalytic. Like, people take what they get out of certain theorists or thinkers rather than having this debate, over who's right or how to the correctly read it.
And it's not interesting. I don't get it. Well, before, maybe when I was studying philosophy, it was something that would motivate me. Uh, but slowly, as I'm aging, I lost completely this ability. Like, I don't get it how people can be so excited about those concepts and arguing about those concepts and digging deeper and reading Bolakan. I don't completely get it. Like, there is the only thing, and it's also weird and not healthy, probably. The only thing that it's not that it motivates me, but I feel that it's important enough for me not to be excited, to look into it, to dedicate myself to it, is the suffering, the human suffering and the trauma, and when people uh, expose it or think through it, or failing to think through something. And it's rare to find, and it's hard to open up in others. And you need special settings, and it requires, like, it's very rare in the world. But maybe just perhaps my weirdness, but maybe it's also something that uh, people, maybe it's just certain stage of life, aging,
Mhm.
when, or my taste, at least the way I can tolerate the world. But everything else, the philosophical, academic environment, it's only rare things that would resonate, um, and form of communication that I can still tolerate. And as I age, I get more disillusioned in even those things. Like, if I would, the way I can comprehend the person is through their trauma, because I can see now, according to me, to my comprehension, which I'm not imposing to anyone, but there is nothing substantial in a person except for their suffering, and the individuality they have is their suffering, the trauma that creates them, and they exist in a mode of choosing to exist, approaching their death, disappearing. And so this fragile, maybe, dimension of existence, this is what I would value. And for me, this is the way of comprehending others and the world and relationship. And there is nothing substantial and apart from it, from me, that I can relate to or motivate myself through. But at the same time, I see people around and students that are still able, and I remember myself before, when I was able to, maybe when I was less depressed, and I was able to tolerate other things. But I also think that maybe it's the stage of life, like older stage of life, when there is less of you, when your existence is more fragile. You see people um, from underside of their existence. There is first stage, more when you're more happy, more things excite you when you are all against depression and you want to be happy. And then there is other stage. I'm not saying that's the good one, and it's a progress. Um, might be the contrary, when it's time for you, to disappear.
Yeah, before it was when we believed that there was some sort of fantasy that this knowledge would like help us in some way or make us feel fulfilled or something. Now we're just decaying.
And I would used to, approach maybe some kind of life. You need to build your life and then live your life, right? More or less in harmony, not happiness, but like good, successful life. And now it's such a joke. And you might with all the signs of not success, but life is you got what you wanted, where you was what you was reaching for, but it's even worse than you was trying to get it, because the way it relieves itself to you, it's like just like a farce. You don't have reasons to complain now, because like you published the book, yay. You wanted to publish a book before. And now it's such a joke that it's not what it promised to be, right, before, when you was naive. And it means that it would never be, you'll never get to this place of when you are feeling successful and your life is complete, maybe for a little while, but you understand that it's an illusionary thing, and other
Totally.
people won't believe you. Because
They'll find out. They'll find out in their own process. I think though also that's what a lot of analysts mistake is that, like concept, the analyst is in the position of the subject supposed to know, right? And I feel like a lot of analysts buy into that, they believe that the subject's supposed to know, and they're acting from that position. And I think that's a big problem.
well, the problem with subjects supposed to know is that it's problematic, because even if you don't know, it's still a certain position of not knowing that you impose. So it's problematic in this way, and it's the whole psychoanalytic structure is extremely problematic, and it's quite hard to transform it even the idea of transformation implies the improvement and someone operating on it. So even knowing that you're not supposed to know, not give knowledge, is still some kind of even negative guidance in a negative form, like not giving guidance, a prohibition, still guidance, you see.
It's still also seen as like withholding guidance. Then you're doing something. You're still doing something to the person.
You still are in position of being analyst, even if you are subverting it in a way. But at least probably in some form is better than the conventional therapy, when psychoanalytic psychotherapeutic practice, when one promises salvation and nothing, and other is guided to some form of salvation from suffering or improvement. There is, at least this one is more interesting when you're subverting the.
At least maybe there's an attempt not to do that, because it's exactly like what we were just talking about. You can guide people to be like, okay, studies show that if you go on a walk 3 times a week, you'll be less depressed. And then the person does it and finds that's not true. Wow, I'm still depressed. And then now you failed. It's just like setting yourself up for infinite failure.
You need to go 4 times next
Yeah.
week.
Twice a day. Just keep increasing it. I also think later in the book you talk about politics a bit, and I thought that was really interesting how you talked about conservative politics being like nostalgia facing, and then there's more like revolutionary emancipatory politics being a little paranoid, but also like they both promise this sort of salvation. Like if we could only rid ourselves of the obstacle, the conservatives might say like, oh, the immigrants or whatever, and the revolutionaries might say, oh, like we have to topple this government, then we'll be able to form one that will be better and we'll all be happy. But like that's not how it works. Doesn't work. I thought that was interesting as well. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
So first, the concept of negative psychoanalysis, it's actually originated as a part of critical theory, with Jacobi criticizing capitalist society and contrasting the concept of negative psychoanalysis to positively oriented conventional psychology, which just claims that your own suffering is your problem. You need to change yourself, work on yourself, so you'll be a good subject of in service of capitalism, like it's your own fault. And Jacobi, this idea of critical psychoanalysis, so negative psychoanalysis, comes as the criticism of social order, that it's not your problem, but it's a problem with the unjust social order, and therefore what is required is some kind of revolution to overthrow it. But and I like his idea of negative psychoanalysis, because it means embracing, not trying to heal your inner suffering, but at least embracing it for the reasons of revolutionary transformations, like the spirit of that your suffering is shared suffering. So you unite with others, and you and dedicate yourself to revolutionary changes. So up to a point where you don't escape from it and unite through it, I like it. But the problem with later, you transform it and the society will be better society with less suffering. I would question it, because it won't. You can solve a certain problem, and you probably should, like overthrow capitalism, something like it. Um, but it won't bring the absence of suffering. It will just transform suffering. So my idea of negative psychoanalysis is forever negative psychoanalysis. There is suffering, nothing else substantially, only suffering, and it's the way we unite with others. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to improve anything, but any improvement would be transformation of this suffering. The new suffering invention of new suffering. Better, not better. It's hard to say which suffering is better, But so this idea that something has to be changed, and the salvation will come either in the form of individual salvation, which is uh, conventional psychology would propagate. Like you need to work on yourself, or psychotherapy, you need to go into psychotherapy, and then your life will be fixed, the salvation in this life will come, you won't suffer anymore, and you're not supposed to. Or the form of collective salvation, which critical theory and critical psychoanalysis offer, that we need to transform, we need to introduce some revolutionary changes in society, get rid of some problematic people, political groups, or phenomena like patriarchy, and then happy society will be installed. It won't. And I would share Foucault idea here of because he was politically active, but he called himself pessimist activist. So you still have to do it, but you will fail. And there's beauty about it, that you're doing it knowing that it's in vain, knowing that you would fail, and you just working on the next failure, not necessarily the problem you're working on, not overthrowing patriarchy, but it's even more suffering after you overthrow it. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have been doing it. You should, but precisely it won't end well. And maybe real commitment is when you know it, like real commitment to people. For me, it's embodied in the end of life care. You won't save anyone, but you still care, and it's a wasteful effort, but you have to do it. Not that you have to, but you're doing it. So that's the failure. What I would value, I end up valuing the most in this life.
No, I totally agree, and I think that's one of the things that's, I don't know if it maybe a little relief. The only small relief that I feel like psychoanalysis can provide, is people coming to that position where they realize there's no solution, there's nothing that's gonna save them, there's nothing that's gonna fix it, and then making your way from there, like that's I think the best we could do.
Mhm. And I think art, why we longing so much for this dimension and dedicate ourselves to this dimension, because there is something in there that is wasteful per se. It's not. It is a failure. It's not supposed to be um, not a failure. It is like the failing. I would say the operation, death drive operating, or something like that. The creativity for the sake of creativity, not for anything else. Maybe beauty too.
Yeah, I feel like I choose art because I still feel ridiculous and go through the phase of like, why do I do this? This is ridiculous. What is the point? There is no point. I hate myself and I hate this art. But I do that less than when I'm writing. When I'm writing, I feel like that like pretty much every day. But at least when I make art, there's like a few days where I'm like, oh, I like doing this. And then I get to that point again. And then I'm like, but I keep doing it. So I choose that.
It's like dedicating yourself to something until you hit the point of its meaninglessness and impossibility. And then it helps you to hold on to the illusion that some other kind of activity is less meaningful. Like it's unbearable. The core of things, I think, is suffering. Unbearable was relationship with people and basically existence in the world, and any kind of activity. The core of it is results in suffering and impossibility of proceeding. So we switch one to another until we'll discover this core, the meaningless core of it, and this is how we're functioning, more or less.
Totally. Should we talk a little bit too about, you talked about the death drive for the individual, but also how society has this death drive?
This drive of society is Todd McGovern's concept that he introduced. So death drive is not something that belongs to individual, like in Freud. For Todd McGovern, he's trying to think of the death drive as a collective drive, or as a collective force, a collective something. And it's quite similar idea with for that Spielrein introduces. So it's basically initial version of the death instinct that Sabina Spielrein was talking before Freud started to talk about it. It's like the Freud here between Spielrein and Todd McGowan is unnecessary link. If you take him away, the death drive is going to be shared. It's going to be the phenomena that create a social bond, not only individual, but something in between people. And this is how it's, for me, it's very interesting in this way. For Spielrein, one could say that it's social phenomena because she would talk about love and motherhood. And unlike Freud, she would actually talk about it, because when Freud talks about sexuality or love or whatever, he's not talking about, he's talking about the desire inside the subject, like what you, which is the man thing, the desire of the individual to possess. Like, it's not the interrelational, it's not something in between others, it's what you want inside your head, you know, what you are. So it's not love if it's inside you, it's your longing for others, not love. Love is in between people, it's not a maternal drive, it's not within you, it's in between. It presupposes the connection to something even non-existent, you know, to somewhere outside. It's not within you. Love is not within you. Motherhood is not within you. It's there somewhere. There is where the point where there is no you. Even sexuality, it's not the desire to have sex or something like it. It's in between. It's there. It's not in the person. So in Freud, he takes death drive, which is initially in Spielrein interpretation, it's not, it's more intersubjective, less with more about self-destruction, the absence of you, when you depart from yourself, when your I dissolves, when your self dissolves. And Freud makes it back your own instinct or your own drive for like what you want, even your own self-destruction within you. So it's more interconnectivity in McGovern, Todd McGovern, and Sabina Spielrein. And it's from this position, if it's intersubjective, you can talk about death drive, you can link it to love, to social bond, you can comprehend it as something that constitutes a social bond that is self-annihilating, self-sabotaging, this absurd of self-sabotaging nature of connectivity between others. And in relation to this self-sabotaging, self-annihilative connectivity of people, which can be embodied in love or something else, this self is secondary or more illusionary. And the death drive that self has as illusionary, more illusionary entity would be just the result of the death drive, which is intersubjective phenomena. Why are you asking about it?
Just because I think it's interesting for people to hear about,
It's not common to think about death drive in this way, because normally the death drive would be associated, especially in American context, it would be associated exclusively as well, all psychology, even psychoanalysis, very is oriented to individual, fixing individual problems and comprehending what is a person, the subject. And this kind of thinking, especially, and the death drive would be something that person manifests, and the individual desire. And it's interesting to think of it as intersubjective, but it's quite hard to not only with death drive to transform, to change the language in such a way, and this attitude, not to start with yourself, but to start with interconnectivity with others, like the seeing self as more illusionary, because the whole psychology and psychoanalysis, even philosophy, they would basically, this is the main thing they would talk about, and the way language is structured is through seeing it as the initial instance of existence. It's very hard to talk about society actually, or social bond actually, and start with it without seeing people as separate and just one who is added to each other. Just technically, it's very quite hard to do.
Well, I think you did a beautiful job in your book. And I think it's really important for people to understand that, and understand the lack as like constitutive of society and politically, and of the subject.
By the way, for Sabine Spielrein, she only writes a couple of words about it, but it basically overthrows Lacan's comprehension and this more conventional comprehension of how language works or how symbolic works. Because for Lacan, and normally we would talk about speech, talking as constituting subject, the individualization and separation from the symbolic, from the primordial order, maternal order, like subject appears through language, through talking. But for Spielrein, she would say that talking, we find relief in talking to others, because through talking we participate in the symbolic shared space of dissociating from yourself. So it's the departure of, on the contrary, it would be maternal dimension of connecting to others, which is like obvious idea, right? But for us, it doesn't work that way. So talking is like trying to make yourself, which is absence, understood, like being language. Talk with others is connecting with others. When the child talks to a mother, it's connecting, being with the mother, existing with her, synchronizing with her in a form of language. Of course, there are different dimensions of symbolic order in Lacan and in Christopher, where there is the more less individualized speech, more individualized speech, but profoundly, there's still this maternal dimension of connectivity, where you are the one who is talking. It's rather secondary in relation to this very talking and the connection through language.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe alienation comes first and the child's trying to communicate. I know when I did the class at GCAS, that's the thing that I remember the most about it, was someone arguing with me about something I said, and I said, but Lacan said blah blah blah. And I was like, well, Lacan is not God. It's like Lacan is a man, was a man, and he had some really interesting ideas that can be very generative, and people seem to enjoy trying to master them. But that doesn't mean that everything he said is right or even accurate, because he was just talking, and yeah, people wrote it down as best they could,
The very idea of even Lacan is the worst to comprehend it this way, right? Because he is all, there is no essence of Lacan that you can comprehend and then use it and then comprehend the people. And it's quite hard to understand how people um, unconsciously, even without realizing it, treating Lacan in that way, because he's not like, he's not subject supposed to know. We know it, and nonetheless, people would say it, like, even admitting that there is nothing to find in there. You're not supposed to have this attitude to Lacan, but nonetheless, this is what they are articulated. Maybe because it's still one wants to be part of academia, and we need to practice this kind of rely on our fathers and um, whatever, in whatever
Yeah, this
form.
mastery.
But it's still very strange, especially in relation to Lacan. Instead of being Lacan, being provocative, weird, and saying nonsense, people would actually try to make sense out of it.
Yeah, trying to make a system. I like reading Lacan, or I used to. I used to like reading Lacan because I felt like it felt like reading a seminar felt like the experience of analysis when you're having like a kind of analytic session that where you get to some sort of insight. It's like it just takes you on this like weird tangent and you're going around here and you're like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden you have this kind of like, aha, okay, I understand something. And then it disappears and then you go continue on this like journey. I felt like it kind of mirrored the psychoanalytic session, and I think my understanding from reading maybe when he was speaking in person, maybe people got that kind of feeling as well from his provocations and just like it made them work and try to make sense of things and they were able to like make sense of something in themselves and maybe that's why it resonated with so many people. But I don't see it as like a system that he was trying to impart that's like something you can teach in this kind of logical way.
It is interesting experience, and maybe the philosophy in general works in this way, because it doesn't work for me that way anymore, except for some really rare things that don't irritate me. um, but maybe before it was interesting to get the experience of like interesting interpretation or interesting just experience of thinking about it in this particular way. But it now feels like trying to feels like trauma response in a good way, trying to escape from something into this, distract yourself from something more profound, which in the dimension in which you won't be able to do all that things. It's like watching a show, a TV show or something. It's a similar thing. But my question was rather, what is this that we are escaping from? Where like in Lacan, it fails, the comprehension fails, and you're nullified in a way, and you start all over again. But this more of the dimension of a failure itself that is interesting. That Lacan seminar would only touch through the failure, when you're losing it. What if it's just the dimension of loss, nothing else? Or you're losing it faster than in Lacan, just it only exists as lost. Which Lacan is subverting, right? Academia. It's not, but still, he is part of academia now in this way, like normal way. What if it's just the despair and nothing else? You don't even try to um, comprehend it.
Yeah, no, that's why I've actually interviewed some Jungians lately because I thought I'm kind of more interested in the trajectory of him as a person and that his like theory is so outside of academia and like, this split that they had, like they like the Jungians themselves just kind of did their own thing and they don't have an interest in being academia. And of course the academics like totally poo-poo them and just think he's crazy or whatever. But like I kind of think it's interesting that they like made their way in this separate way outside of the whole kind of discourse in that way. So I've had a couple of Jungians on just to hear about what they're doing because I think that in itself is more interesting to me right now. Like there is a way to work and not be part of this system.
I still don't like Jungians, but now I realize first for what Jung did to Spielrein, but the other thing is when you're in academia, you're not supposed to like them. And even though I'm not in academia, I don't like academia, but I still don't like Jungians. So like, don't like anyone anymore.
Yeah, well, you can exist there too.
That's what I do.
But I did realize at a point, I'm like, where did I get this bias? It's just like imprinted into me, like, oh, and like Wilhelm Reich went crazy, and like, why do I believe that all these people went crazy? What if I actually went and looked at their work? Would it be as crazy as it's made out to be? It's like, I don't know, maybe not. But I'm at least like, yeah, trying to be more open to other people's forms of,
You know,
yeah,
I'm punished and I'm
managing.
even more crazy than Jungians. What I mean.
Well, we're almost at the end of the hour. Was there anything you wanted to mention that we didn't get to? Anything you have coming up or anything going on with GCAS or anything at all?
Yeah, I'm going to, with Todd McGowan, we're preparing edited volume on death and love. And I don't have to write this one. I'll just write chapter on Spielrein. That's it. And I'm not planning any books or anything. I want to dedicate myself to art, but it's still planned. Um, yeah, otherwise, total frustration.
Fair. Well, it was lovely to speak with you. I'm glad we had the chance to do this.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Yeah, and feel free to be in touch anytime. Bye, Julie.
Bye, Vanessa. Thank you.